You got it good? You good? Oh, that's right. You're going to UIW. I forgot.
Okay. Good morning. Shabbat Shalom. See all of your beautiful faces. I did want to let you know that today we're trying a few new things, and thanks to Seth. Seth is streaming this Zoom call to our United Israel World Union YouTube channel. We feel like that would be also something. In other words, someone may not be part of this call, but they can at least watch it. And so this YouTube video is being streamed. Just wanted to let you know that. Okay, I am steady letting people in. It looks like a decent turnout today. What are some of your thoughts today? First of all, I know that we are all of our minds are on things elsewhere. And, we've all been keeping up, I think most of us anyway, have been keeping up with events in the Middle East. And just wanted to let you know that I'm glad to be here. But today, as you noticed, we didn't just jump back into our normal routine. I wanted to do something that was biblical, something that was somewhat relevant. And I think that's what led me to the topic today. So let me hear some of your thoughts today. Somebody jump in and help me out here. Anyone? You gonna make me talk for another hour or? All right, Dave, is that you with your hand up? Hello, Dave. Good morning. Shabbat Shalom.
Hey, well, Ross, I just want to say it was very, very well done and very appropriate in the time. And I mean, it's based on the Bible and not, current political beliefs. And it gets sketchy when you start talking about what land belongs to whom. And I like the way you started out. The whole thing belongs to God. So
Yeah.
everything after that is kind of debatable, I guess. The idea that someone was blasting you and me on there saying, well, they're not following the law, so it's not their land. Well, it's a bigger story than that. And I wish this guy was on here today because he's really wrong when he talks like that. I'm not going to get all Christian on you, but there was a Christian, this Rabbi Jesus said, judge not, for with what judgment you judge, you shall be judged, and measure not, for with what judgment you measure, you shall be measured. For whether you believe in Jesus or not, those are good teachings right there. And my point is, there's a bigger story with the Holocaust, and he's got to look at world history. And I don't care if there are rabbis that deny the Holocaust happened. There were Jews going into Iran saying we support this notion. Well, forget all of that. There's a bigger picture going on. And James got his hand up. He did a thing about the fluidity of prophecy. You have to step back, and I'm not even judging or making judgments. I'm just watching what's going on, and I think that you laid a foundation that we, as people who believe in the Bible, should base our beliefs on. And the last thing I want to say, I do love a lot of Palestinian people, and they're my friends. I don't hate Palestinians. Hatred's not. It's the idea of the Hamas and those teachings that I don't like, and I don't want people going off and becoming, anti-Semitic about every Arab, because I have many great Arab friends. and they disagree with us. And the Imam of Peace in Italy said, stay out of Israel. This belongs to the Jews. I mean, there are many great Arabs out there. And I don't want people thinking he's just an Arab hater. I love the Arab people, and I have many close Muslim friends. So having said that, great talk today. And I hope I can get other people to chime in.
Hey, thanks, Dave. And James, right before I give it to you, I just wanted to kind of say amen to what David is saying. The first step we have to do, in my opinion, what I tried to do today was from a biblical perspective, let's sort this out. And I saw James mention David Horowitz in some of his work. So it's not about not loving a certain group or saying that, push everybody of any people in the sea. That's not at all what we're talking about. So, yes, James.
So, hello, everybody. Let me put my hand down. Yeah, just a couple things. The first, if you don't have Ralph Bunton's book, The Book of David, that's David Horowitz, not King David. Chapter 3, particularly, I read again last night. Ross and I were texting about it. David knew the grandfather of King Hussein, not, the current ruler is the grandson of King Hussein, and he's named for the grandfather, Abdullah. And Horowitz communicated with him. We have the letters. And Abdullah answered in Arabic, and we have the original letters in our archives, and they're translated. And Ralph covers this well. And David proposed a peace plan that Abdullah accepted, believe it or not.
Yeah.
He said this because before all of the post-20s, 30s, 40s hatred started, like kill the Jews, they don't even belong here and all that, many Arab scholars, and some today, as you know, and you can look this up, there were some things in the chat, even Patty was putting and Jodell. I've heard major Islamic scholars in Jerusalem addressing the question of the land, and guess what they say? These are Muslims, scholars. They say exactly what Ross said today, because the Quran actually teaches that.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, there's a lot of things about the Quran I don't like, because Muhammad claimed his revelation was the final one that superseded everything else, just as Christians claim theirs is the final one that supersedes everything else. So that replacement theology from both groups, I don't think most of us would accept.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that everything that is in the holy books of Islam that they consider holy is historically incorrect. But people don't know that. The main thing that is behind the whole campaign, as Ross has pointed out, the Al-Aqsa campaign, the flood, is that the mosque to the north is Al-Aqsa. And good Muslim scholars, I'm talking about at my university, and they have to be careful even saying this, believe it or not. They have to couch it and say, well, many think that that is the mosque in Saudi Arabia, nothing to do with Jerusalem. Jerusalem's never mentioned in the Quran. So everybody, it's the third holiest site in Islam. And the Hamas wants that as a cause, but if they're shooting rockets indiscriminately and unguided at Jerusalem, and Saddam Hussein did that too, remember, at the Scud missiles? Unguided. But Jerusalem's so holy, that's the holiest site in the world. So I'm going to, sort of like I would take my slingshot and shoot a steel bullet in the air in a crowd of people. Yeah. I don't know where it'll land. My wife said the other day, and I know we've all thought of this, what if one of those rockets hit the mosque? You know what? Israel would be blamed. Just like the hospital the other day. Immediately, Israel would be blamed, and we would have World War III probably. But anyway, that's one thing. Read, in this book covers many other things that relate to what Ross said. Our founder was a lion of the tribe of Judah. He was gentle and sweet. He could cry at the drop of a hat over any suffering, even just meeting people like you all. He was amazing, but he also was fierce. He stood up to Nikita Khrushchev face to face in the famous event where he pounded his shoe and he shook his finger in the face of the premier of Russia and said, "When are you letting our people go?" And we have a picture of it. Gromyka's standing there. It's amazing. This is all in David's book. So if you're new and don't know much about United Israel, you need to read the biography of the founder, and then you'll understand.
Yeah.
And he loved all peoples, absolutely loved them, and had many, many friends. And remember in the 20s when David went, some of the friction that started just after he was there was not there. Many of the Zionists that had cleared land were friends with Arab communities. This is still true today throughout the land, and you just don't hear about it. Some of you live in Israel, I think, and could testify to that. If you've never been, I wanted to say to you that two things about this use of the term Arab in Palestine. First of all, Israel has a large Arab population. Israel, Jews. Everybody know that? I know all of this group does, but people don't know that. They talk about the Arabs and Israeli conflict. It's not an Arab-Israeli conflict. The Jews are 600,000 Arab Jews were expelled in 48. 600,000. Imagine. That's as back in those days, that's like an entire country. And they were sent out of 22 countries. Right? Get out. We don't want the Jews. It's happening right now. It's happening right now. Jews have been told to leave. History's repeating itself. Now, what happened when they left? Some were allowed to transfer money to bank accounts. We've talked to them. We know people that came at that time. And up through 1956, 600,000. Real good stats on that. This book that Ross and I have on Kindle and printed has maps of where they came from, each country, with the list of who came from what. Complete records. This is not fiction. So when people, as Ross mentioned just in passing, in the census of 1900, the Ottoman census, go to Wikipedia, census of Palestine, 1900, the Ottoman census. These are the Turks, right? More Jews in the old city than Arabs. I mean, than Muslims and Christians. I just messed up myself saying Arabs.
Yeah.
Because Christian Arabs are Arabs, Jewish Arabs are Arabs. I mean, somebody that speaks Arabic and is from an Arabic culture. We call them Sephardim, but usually that means people from Spain, but it has come to mean. So to call Israel a racist state, Israel is the least racist state on the planet because it's made up of 100 different countries all melded together.
Yeah.
There's no other country on the planet that has 100 other nationalities mixed in, all guaranteed rights and so forth. What I was going to say also, at Hebrew University, go to the undergraduate campus or the graduate in Jerusalem, and about a quarter of the students are, quote, Arab.
And faculty. And faculty, too, James.
And faculty. Engineers, doctors, lawyers, people getting degrees, people moving freely, writing. Many of you have been there. So what about those that are walled out? Well, I can't, I'm not going to repeat all the history, and many of you know that, but just on this point, I was there when the wall was put up. And the reason I can remember very well the first Intifada, I was there with students digging at Suba in Ein Kerem with my students from UNC Charlotte. And there were 3 bombings that weekend in Jerusalem. Remember? The pizza place, and then in the Russian Quarter, and another one. These were Hamas bombings. Okay. And that was right around 2005 or six.
Yeah.
Actually, this would actually be the second intifada. I'm sorry. We had to stop digging at Mount Zion. And we were told to go back to the kibbutz where we were digging and to just stay there for our safety. And after that, the wall was built and the bombings mostly stopped. And one of our friends, our good friends, Rabbi Perlmutter, his son was on a bus in Hadara. He was an Israeli paratrooper, and he was on his way to visit a wounded soldier, a friend of his in the army. And he got up and went to the back of the bus to give an Arab woman his seat, a Muslim Arab older woman, like any gentleman would do. Okay. Yeah. And guess where the bomb was? Under the back seat of the bus. Okay. That was Ari. And if you've been to Tamar, you know, you've been to his tomb and so forth. So I just wanted to say that Jews in Tiberias, Maimonides. Now, some of you have heard of Gabori. Amitzia Gabori was our good friend. He's the son of Moshe Gabori, who David studied with in the 1930s and 40s. Amitzia Gabori, several of us have spent hours with him. He told us how they had to flee Jerusalem. The Jordanians in 48 made Jerusalem, and here's the term, that you ready? The German term, Judenrein, clean of Jews. It's a Nazi term, meaning how many Jews were in Jerusalem in 1900, even though they could only go to the wall and pray 2 days a week. But they were there. They were the majority population. Silwan is the most radical village in Jerusalem. You would not even drive through Silwan as a Westerner. Your car will be stoned, certainly during the Intifada. Guess what? It's a Yemenite settlement. It was founded by Yemenite Jews in the 19th century. In 1948, we go under the Jewish Quarter on tours in the Wall Museum, and they have pictures of the Jewish Quarter before it was rebuilt. Some of you have been to the Jewish Quarter today. That's all rebuilt. The Jordanians blew it all up. King Hussein built the Seven Arches Hotel on top of the Jewish cemetery on the Mount of Olives and bulldozed the tombs. Can you imagine if the Israelis did that to the Muslim cemetery in front of the Golden Gate? What if you heard on the news today on CNN, Israel is bulldozing Muslim tombs and building a luxury hotel in the Kidron Valley? It's unthinkable, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is anybody talking about that? No. It's just, so you got to know your history. So this book actually, and Ross is reading another one by Smith. We can put it maybe in the chat. I think all of us should really educate ourselves so that in this time, so we can calmly, you've got the biblical stuff today, but also calmly discuss in a factual way, because people don't know what some of the facts actually are. And many of you do know these things, of course. Finally, I want to make the point, and this is in reaction to that guy who was posting, I think it's a guy, about how Israel's not a righteous nation and they're not keeping the covenant, so they don't have the right to the land either. John Holley, may he rest in peace, a dear friend of many of us who's now gone, lived into his 90s, great researcher and historian. He began to point out in many, many lectures before he died in the 90s, 2000s in Jerusalem, that the sequence of restoration is not return because you're doing the covenant, but just get back there.
Yeah.
You can read it in Ezekiel. Just go home. Like people might leave Morocco today, right? Say, well, are they halakhically observant of Torah? They might not be. They're Jews, but they're Jews. They need to leave, get out. The Zionists, we all know, we're kind of secular, right? But what does Ezekiel and all the prophets say? Then the Spirit is poured out afterwards. That's when, and I don't know if that'll even be in our own time. Zionism has taken over 100 years. I'm not this wild apocalyptic guy that tells you this is all going to wind up in the next 5 or 10 years. I have no idea. But I do know the sequence is you go back to the land, and then a certain kind of spiritual restoration or renaissance begins to take place. And that certainly has happened on many, many, many levels, for sure, with non-Jews and Jews that have gone there. So those are just a few things that I have on my mind. All of us have much more to say, I know. But this has affected me. Like I remember the 6-Day War so well. I'm old, 20 years older than the young man, Ross Nichols. So we used to call him the young one, but now he's caught up with us, I think, in terms of his... But when I first met him, you've seen these pictures of me and Ross. Ross looks like he's 14. Seth looks like an old man compared to Ross when I met him.
Yeah.
He wasn't that old. I mean, he wasn't that young, really, but he looks like he's 17 because that was how Ross looked then. And anyway, I guess what I'm trying to say is, I don't know. I went through the 6-Day War, so I was going to say that. And it was a lot like this until we saw things turning. It was, I mean, I didn't sleep for 5 days. I watched TV. Some of you that are old enough, Eric, I'm sure you watched it. Others, we were just so riveted. And then it turned out to be a victory. And I hope we all know the basics. The one thing I tell anyone I discuss, though, it's such a simple point. Sam Harris has made it recently. Bill Maher has made it. Everyone, lots of people are making this now on YouTube, and you can make it with your friends. It's a simple point. Golda Meir has different quotes that people quote, but the one that's the best to quote, I think, is that if Israel's enemies were armed and Israel wasn't right now, there would be no Jews left. From the river to the sea. That's the cry of these protests, right? That's the reason the Palestinians rejected every single offer of the 5 peace treaties that were offered, because they wanted it all. Have you looked at the partition plan of the UN? They would have had 10 times more than they're saying they want. They go, well, we just want to go back to 67. They would have had more than 67 if they'd accepted the 47 partition plan of the UN, right?
Yep.
And Jews never stole a foot of land. They bought the land. And it was land nobody wanted. And this is actually true. They weren't stealing land from anybody. They were going over there, buying the land and then cultivating it. So anyway, everything stood in the balance in June of 67. It was 2,300 years to the day since Alexander defeated Darius and headed for Jerusalem, to the day. How did those things happen? I have no idea. But that's a fact. 334 BC, do the math, June 7th, 1967. And that was predicted by a Methodist preacher, Adam Clark, in 1830. 1830. Usually people say things like way off in their own time, like, I think in the next 20 years. And here's a guy in 1830, commentary on the book of Daniel. He says, I think this prophecy indicates that Gentile control of Jerusalem will end in the year 1966. He missed it a year because he didn't know that when you go from BC to AD, you have to add a year because there's no year 0. Isn't that interesting?
Oh, yeah.
I've got his commentary right here in my office. And my dad read that. And he was Oh, he was a very strong Christian, but against prophecy stuff like Herbert Armstrong that I was listening to as a kid. He's like, it's all been fulfilled in the church. The church is the kingdom. Don't read that stuff literally, James. You call me Jimmy, you're gonna get misled. So it was his copy of the book. He wrote it in the margin where Adam Clark said this will be fulfilled in the year 1966, writing in 1830. Think about this. And my dad put, no way.
Yeah.
And he wrote that in 1962, my dad. Later, I talked to him about that. And he said, probably need to restudy that. Okay, so I've said enough. You guys jump in.
Hey,
Thank
thanks, James. And I know a lot of the people have been following you on your YouTube channel, and I guess in many ways they've missed you for a little while. But like you said, you've been just so into the news, and I'm behind as well. I mean, I have responsibilities. I need to be doing certain things, and I'm trying to keep up, but this has consumed me because for a couple of reasons. One, like many of you, I have a shelf of books on the Middle East and modern geopolitics, and I've read off and on, read bits and pieces over the years, and I think I have a fairly decent handle. But what I'm really thinking today, what bothers me to the core, I'll get into the religious people in a minute, but just people in general are speaking out. And as James told me in a phone call the other day, they don't know a line of history. Not a line. Because you see these young people, high school students, who are waving a Palestinian flag, and they're saying Palestine free from the river to the sea and all that. If you were to walk up and interview and say, can you tell me when the Palestinian, and I'm not talking about being a jerk, and I mean, just ask them for any facts at all. They don't know anything, and neither do a lot of these on college campuses. And I mean, some people are looking for something to join. I get that there's this idealistic youth, where someone says, "Oh, I've heard that Israel is an abuser and that they're," but I tell you what bothers me. I have friends that have approached me and asking for clarity, and I'll give you an example. If in the Middle East, if a homosexual were to be open or try to be open, there's one place that they can do that in the Middle East, and that's Israel. And what I'm saying is that if but they won't even try. What I'm without beating around the bush. I see people marching with signs that say "Queer for Palestine," and I'm thinking, you have no idea. You could not march with that sign safely in Gaza. You couldn't do it in Judea and Samaria. It's just, it's really sad because people don't know a lick of history. Dave Tyler, yes, sir.
Oh, Ross, I'm laughing so hard I had to stop before. Here's here's something that these people have to have I don't want to sound like I'm a Baptist. My Baptist friends say, come to Jesus meeting moment. Here's my point. We were in Israel in June. We stayed in Tel Aviv, and everywhere there was the rainbow flag and LGBTQ plus. My point is, Israel welcomes those people. And if they went into Gaza, they would be murdered for wearing those clothes and being gay or whatever they mean.
Yeah.
And my point is, that is how powerful Israel is as a country. They have an open mind. They allow everyone to, hey, I don't agree with a lot of that stuff, but it's not my point. I believe what I believe. And as long as you're not hurting me, go in peace.
Well, let me jump, Dave, just real quick, if I can.
No problem. I just want to mention that.
No. You don't have to go. Keep your mic. I just wanted to say, in addition to that, we're talking about a democratic society. I know some people would favor a more religiously oriented society, but my point is this: it's like, in a way, and this is the reason some of these nations and cultures hate Israel and the U.S. Remember, we're the big Satan, they're the little Satan.
Right.
And the reason is because we are free and open, where you can't discriminate against someone in Israel because they're Arab or Muslim or Christian.
Right.
I mean, to me, it's such a contrast between this culture and the one that we would hope would spread throughout the world. And it is not welcome under Sharia. And I think
No.
that's the thing that we have to recognize. So I don't know, like one of my sons asked me the other day, why don't you go to a college campus and, set up a table but see, you can't talk, you can't reason because they don't know, nor do they care to know any of the historical documents. They don't want to know that. It's like James brought
Yeah.
up this thing about the bombing of the hospital, right, Dave?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, it's the old, a lie will make it around the world before truth gets its boots on.
And the New York Times posted that Israel did this without fact checking. And
Yeah.
here's another thing that bothers me about the current environment in higher learning. They're fascist. If you don't believe like them, then you're canceled. I'm sorry. I don't mean to offend Dr. Tabor or any other teacher. That's just what they do. When I went to school,
He got out just in time.
he did. When I went to school, we had a debate class. So we went into debate class, and the teacher said, here are the 10 subjects we're going to talk about. Say what side you're on. I did that. Everyone in the class did it. So in the first debate, he said, those people who are pro-abortion, you're going to argue against abortion.
Yeah.
For you people are against abortion, you're going to argue for it. And you're going to be graded on how good you did.
Right.
And so it's understanding the other side. And my point was, at the end of the day, you learned that, hey, maybe the other side has some good points.
Yeah.
My dog said, well, hey, Sasha. So my point is, we have to the editor of Harvard News, Harvard newsletter for the school, is a liberal, which is fine. But he wrote a good article and he said 97% of what we present is liberal. This is not right. We should have diversity in thought, because there are good thoughts on both sides of the spectrum. And, I feel bad for the liberals today, because the woke and all that is not liberal. The most liberal document that ever was made was called the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. That's true liberalism. Listen to Bill Maher. And I support that. So my point at the end of the day is, we got to listen to the side of the people in Gaza. I'm not against that, but what Hamas has done, it's like the mob, and I'll say this really quickly. The mob moved into the Arab or the Irish neighborhoods in New York. The mob moved in, said, we want 4% of your gross, and we're going to protect you. The Irish said, what do you got to protect us from? And they said, everything. Okay, fine. All right, so then they start paying the 4%. Then the FBI comes in and says, hey, we're going to fix this mob thing. So then the mob leaves. And then the FBI leaves. And then the mob comes back. That's Hamas. And they said, you supported the FBI. You now will die because of your sins against us. And that's what's happened there. You know what I'm saying? Is that Hamas has, they called elections, and there's never been an election. There's never been an election since Hamas has been, and I mean, it just goes on and on.
Or in the West Bank.
Yeah.
Right.
Abbas
And
hasn't been elected. I forget how many years now.
2006, he got elected to a 4-year term.
How is that even? And and I've spoken before, and I don't want to be, but here's another one. They made this beautiful place, this beautiful farm to grow flowers and sell them. The Israelis did this. Then they gave them to the Palestinians. In 3 years, it's dead. Because why? Because Israelis are they're focused, they're hyper driven, they do good things, they make my Mac is better, my iPhone's better because of Israeli technology. Not all of it, they just made that one part even a little better. Medical technology, it goes on and on what the Israelis have done. I don't even want to get into weaponry, but they've done great things in software technology. And when an Arab in a normal nation wants a serious heart operation, they come to Israel.
Yeah.
They come to Israel to have that done because it's the best in the world. Maybe the Cleveland Clinic is equal in the heart area. But my point is, why don't we? Those are the good things that can happen. And, I definitely have had a lot of sleepless nights because I'm supporting Israel and we're sending weapons there and protective gear. And I don't want it to be that. I want the swords to be beaten into plowshares, and it's just not going to happen right now. My wife spoke on unconditional love at the last UIWU conference, and she said, Dave, where do we get that? It's our pets is the only thing we can love unconditionally. That was her crying last night. Anyways, I wanted to say to you all, it was a great class today, Ross. I want to reemphasize this was, I think, the wind in your sails was from God himself. It just laid it out perfectly. If you believe in the Bible, forget all the other stuff. Here's what God said about what land belongs to whom, and let's just go from there.
Hey,
anyways, thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Let me say one thing about just to make sure I can get passionate, and sometimes I don't follow notes as closely when I'm passionate, but I want to make it very clear that because Israel is in the place where they're supposed to be geographically, because of that, they will ultimately, there's a connection there to the blessing to the nations of the world. This promise goes from Abraham to Isaac to Jacob. And it basically begins, you're going to be in a land, you're going to be blessed, and those that bless you will be blessed, those that curse you will be cursed. And then it says, be a blessing. The last thing God tells Abraham, be a blessing. Now think about this. Israel has openly shared of its technological advances, all of its talents. At times, Israelis are often the first at natural disasters, earthquakes around the world, flooding, fires. The Israelis send people to help. When Iran is going through many, many difficulties with water and irrigation, I mean, they're in a desert like, the Jews know this thing. They know things like this, so they've offered to share. Of course, Iranians won't take any of this, but if the world, and this, by the way, I'm inclined next week to take this class to the next level, to talk more of, so what? So if Israel is in the land, what does that do? I mean, what's the benefit? Well, it's a benefit for the entire world, ultimately. And so I think I want to develop this a little bit further and maybe in the middle of the week talk more of the geopolitical. But I just wanted to say that I do not think no one in their right mind who has any historical awareness would say that the secular Israeli government has done everything right. That no one would say that. I certainly wouldn't. And it doesn't mean that I back Israel in every step. Now, unlike Dave, I'm not an expert on warfare and things of that nature. So I don't know that I can follow that and be a good commentator on everything that's going on. I can speak from a father's standpoint, from a grandfather's standpoint, from a husband's standpoint, from a decent citizen. When I look at what Hamas did versus
Ross, you were in the Army for a long time, Ross. Stop talking like that.
Yeah, I know a little bit of that. I remember it back when I was a kid. But the idea, though, is, we have to look at, so if Israel's not going anywhere. I mean, even if you took the biblical part of the equation and set it to the side, Israel's not leaving. And these neighbors have to realize what they're going to have to learn to work with Israel. And what was so interesting is that right before the Hamas attack, this Abrahamic Accords thing was beginning to spread, and a lot of the commentators are saying, isn't it interesting that this attack took place right on the verge of Israel meeting with Saudi Arabia and making some inroads into that peace between.
And notice in the Cairo meeting, notice in the Cairo meeting, Saudi Arabia is not there.
Yeah.
Why is that?
I tell you what disturbs me, and then I want other people to talk too. I'm just filling dead air, but I tell you, when I look at James sent me and Dave and a few others, we've been texting back and forth, and James sent the note before I had a chance to see the news. James filled us in on the people who were in the meeting in Cairo. And as I read that list, I couldn't help but feel a little uneasy about what is being talked about, not only in the open at that meeting, but what's being discussed perhaps in closed doors when you get all of those people together. Israel is not out of the woods yet. And in the north, we have Hezbollah, and that's a whole nother game there. Hezbollah, the way I describe it to people, a lot of the Hamas rockets are just, they make them out of the water pipes that the United States pours money, and other European countries pour money to help the Palestinians. Hamas hijacks the money, builds rockets out of water pipes that they were supposed to use to get water to their people, and makes concrete tunnels and all. But when they build these rockets, there are videos out there of them doing this. They fire these. It's like the old Wile E. Coyote. Some of you are old enough to remember the old cartoon. You strap the thing on and he just hopes it hits something. I've had a tour 2 years ago. I had this brilliant idea. I convinced Jono that we were going to do for the Tanakh tour. I said, let's go to all the Philistine cities. And he said, well, that's not really bright because, the Philistine cities are around Ashkelon and all of those places where it's not so safe. I said, it's okay, man. We'll go stay. And I tell you, and of course, I'm prayed up. I think, God, I've just convinced my friend Jono that it's smart and safe to bring a busload of tourists to the 5 Philistine cities for part of our tour. Help me prove to him that this was a good decision. Day one, ask Jono. Day one, we were in the lobby eating breakfast, and rockets are being fired from Gaza, and we have to go run and get in the bomb shelter. And the first day, we had to do this like 5 times just to dodge rockets. These people don't care. They're not out for peace. They want to destroy life. These rockets aren't the really scary part. The bad ones, the more accurate ones are by Hezbollah, because they're getting direct shipments and they can connect those more directly, I think, with higher paid rockets like coming straight from Iran and so forth. Sue, did you have a question? You moved into the spot there. I don't know if that was because you're getting ready to talk or... Okay, I see Betty's hand. Hey, Betty.
Hey, Shabbat Shalom, y'all.
Shabbat Shalom.
As much shalom as we can have.
That's right.
We pray for Israel. Back to one of the points that you brought out regarding Jacob's dream.
Yep.
And the blessing of the land that was to be given, passed down through Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and his children. I think it's interesting that when the ladder came down from heaven, it says that the angels were ascending and descending.
Yeah.
So they were ascending, going up, and then coming back down with messages. So they were like conversations, in my view. going forth from Jacob to the heavens. And I think it's interesting that the word ladder is sulam and has the same gematria as Sinai, because, on Mount Sinai, when Moshe received the Torah, the Ten Commandments, they came down, to us from Hashem. And as we reach back up, as we keep the commandments, then we are in the process of communicating with Hashem, and being blessed by the blessing that He gave Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I just thought that was interesting. I know gematria is kind of weird for a lot of people, but I mean, perhaps there's something to it.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, I think it certainly is interesting. It's one of my favorite stories, this Genesis 28 Vayetze. I taught a class years ago. Betty, you probably remember, and maybe some others that were at the UI conference, but I don't even remember exactly that. I think the title was The Dreams of the Fathers. And in that class, which is part of what inspired me this week as I thought about working through the patriarchal narratives, God gave dreams to His people that ultimately led to the current physical rebirth, if you will, of the physical Israel. And Genesis 28 is so powerful that when you think about that, God gave Jacob a dream that his descendants would be spread abroad throughout all nations, but that God says, I'll bring them back. Now, this is what's so amazing. The promise to Abraham is before he even has any children. The promise to Jacob is before the tribes of Israel exist. This is, right. And we in our day are seeing the manifestation of this. And let me tell you, I have and this isn't a prophetic gift, I have a foreboding from the obvious viewing of what's going on in the world. People, it's a hatred is bubbling up and being manifested, and it is happening on high school campuses, colleges, big cities. They're marching in the street, free Palestine. There is a hatred for Jews. And I tell you, one of the things that keeps coming to me when the initial wave of immigrants of Jews went back to the land and made Aliyah, you know the last verse of the Hebrew Bible? I hate to distract myself, but I'm going to do it. Yes. Some of you know this. Here's the last verse of the Hebrew Bible, and I feel impressed to preach this from the rooftops right now. Here's what it says. Any one of you of all his people, the Lord his God be with him, and let him go up. Amen. I want every one of my Jewish friends, I have Jewish friends. I'm going to start calling my rabbi friends and saying, look, who am I? I'm not Jewish. And even if I say, well, I think I might be from the lost tribes, I don't know. I can't make Aliyah. But I can tell you this, I think that Jews ought to be getting to that place, even though it might seem scary because there's war going on right now, but they ought to be lined up to get over there and join the people. That's my view. And I tell you, that was what happened. That was what happened when immigration first opened up. And one more thing, and I think this is all going to play into next week's class. The Declaration of Independence, the Israeli Declaration of Independence, has this line. It says, the state of Israel will be open for Jewish immigration and for the ingathering of the exiles. Now, let me tell you what that means. Most of you who know your Bible know that it is distinguishing between the people of Judah and those who are the ingathering of the exiles. I think what we're going to begin to see is Israel will open up. You heard it here first, maybe, but at some point, those who are friends of Israel, you might be forced, and I don't mean to sound nutty, but people may be forced. You want to be with the Jews? Join them. So I told a Jewish rabbi friend of mine this week on the phone, I was at this place. I was either going to convert to Judaism, and I don't want to convert to Judaism. I don't align theologically, but almost in a way to show solidarity and tell people, you damn right I'm Jewish. Excuse my French, but I wanted to be that direct. I was either going to do that or get a huge Star of David tattoo, and I haven't decided yet which one I'm going to go with. But if I do both, I just do the tattoo first, because then I can get away with it. Dave Tyler?
Yeah, I wanted to say another thing. One of the most stunning things that happened to me, that I went to Israel the first time in 1995. And the stunning thing was people of every race and color are Jews.
Yeah.
So there were African Jews, there was Asian Jews, there was Arab Jews, there was white Jews, there was Hispanic Jews, every color. And I don't think that's ever brought out, that it's not just Ashkenazi white people.
Yeah.
Although a lot of them are, I get that. But we went and we know we're down by where we live in Iravot. We know that there's totally Black African communities of Jews.
Absolutely. Dimona is filled with Ethiopian Jews. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Dimona means something different to me.
Yeah, yeah. No, I know about that too.
Yeah, but well, when we were doing our videos, the Dimona blimp was watching us.
It has, just so everybody else knows, it has to do with military.
Yeah. So, anyways, but the Ethiopian Jews, and they bring correct Jewish halakha. They bring the good food, and you wouldn't. There's no issue. What the Oriental Jews, we know that in India that the Jews were there. We know in Japan there's Jew, in China. So it isn't about a race. The seed spread everywhere, and all I'm saying is that's the thing I love about it. It's multicultural, and there's all different kinds of Jews. And in my world, there's a big difference between the Sephardim and the Ashkenazi. They're very different. I'm just going to say right now, the Sephardim have much better food, but that's another story. I wanted to say that because people don't bring that out. The Jewish people have embraced, and then of course I want to say one thing about the Ezekiel: the two sticks come together. The two branches come together, make one stick in God's hands. And maybe that's just starting now. I don't know. I'm not a prophecy person, but maybe he's putting, when Judah and Joseph get back together, maybe these things will be different. Anyways, I just wanted to say about the multicultural thing in Israel. I loved it, and there's all kinds of kosher food you can eat, and it's done in all different ways. So
I hear you.
It's a good.
Thanks, right, Dave. Yes, Alistair, how are you, my friend?
Hello, Ross. I'm in Scotland.
Yeah.
As you know, I was on a tour with you and James back in, I think, 2017.
Yeah.
Well, I was back this year in April, May on the West Bank. Now, before I say anything else, I want to say I absolutely condemn Hamas and the terrible things that they have done in the slaughter of innocent people and the taking of hostages.
Yeah.
No doubt about that. I also think that the Palestinian people are failed completely by their leadership there and on the West Bank. But I was on the West Bank in April, and I spoke to people whose homes had been demolished, innocent civilian people in the West Bank whose homes are being demolished. And it's worse than that. They're given an order that their home has to be demolished. If they don't demolish it themselves, and they're fined for even having built it, because there are no permits given on the West Bank, then it's demolished by the authorities, and then they're charged the cost of demolition. So it's a really oppressive situation for many ordinary Palestinians. And I was meeting Palestinian Christians who are trying to work for peace and reconciliation. And they're telling me what a terrible struggle it is to get any kind of justice from the Israeli government. Have you heard of the Tent of Nations? It's a place, a farm outside of Bethlehem. The Nasser family have all their documents, because we know that many Palestinians didn't have registration of their land, their property, but the Nasser family do. And they've been fighting for 20 years to have their right to the land recognized by the Israeli courts. And they're still fighting. They're blocked at every turn. They have to get new surveys done. They have to pay lawyers, and they're still fighting for their rights. That's the other side of the coin, Ross.
Yeah,
they're not being treated equally in Israel. They're not being treated equally in terms of their rights and common justice, and that is not right.
Yeah.
And the other part of what you're saying, which I'm very uncomfortable with, is based on what you're saying. They want the settlers on the West Bank want to push the Palestinians out of the West Bank. This week, the BBC were reporting that some of the militant settlers.
If the BBC said it,
some of the, can I just finish on this point, Ross? Yeah. Some of the militant settlers have been shooting and killing unarmed Palestinians on the West Bank, and driving them from their villages and their homes. That's going on now.
Yeah.
That's terrorism as well.
Yeah. So just so you know,
and that's happening, and that's wrong, and they're not being protected at all by the Israeli army and authorities.
Do you know? And believe me, I'm very familiar with some of the stories that you just described, and in fact, especially if one tunes into the BBC, because they have sided with Hamas, and they say that all of the actions, unlike what you just said, but they do say that. Yes, they do. Officially, they have said they have sided with Hamas, just like some of our politicians.
No, that is wrong, Ross. Can I just correct that? What they said was that according to the rules of broadcasting, they're not meant to take sides. They're meant to report objectively and independently. But they actually have said in broadcast, Hamas is regarded by the US and UK government as a terrorist organization, and they report that.
Good, outstanding.
They do not take the side of Hamas. Okay. That is wrong. That is not true. And I follow BBC all the time.
One thing that I would add, though, because you're very passionate about your view like I am mine, and here's something I would add to the mix. I, too, have been to what you call the West Bank. I, too, have friends that live there. I, too, have heard stories from all sides, and I consider all stories that all of that goes into my thinking. I don't just dismiss this, but you live in Scotland, don't need to know where, but let's say someone came to your area and they liked your area. Now, this is one example, so let me finish. Someone comes to your area and they decide to build a house there, and they bring the materials and they put it up. And let's say that the local governing authorities said, whoa, you can't do that. You don't have a permit. And then let's say that the person who was refused the right to build on that land next to you, you have a permit, but they wanted to build. And then what if that person said, this isn't fair, they're abusing me? So we had a case not too long ago in Jeddah. And there was a big to-do about this, but a lot of it has to do with permits. I can tell you this, Israelis too, settlers, as is the popular vernacular, what most people refer to, settlers, Israelis have had their buildings torn down and demolished. People who lived and had raised their families in Gaza, they had developed farms to raise for children. They had set things up. They lived there. They had been there for generations. But for peace, for the prayer of peace without being murdered, the Israelis gave up Gaza in 2005 for peace, for the hope that they could have peace and their children wouldn't be killed by errant rockets. So the Israeli government pulled them all out of Gaza, made them leave. And so there is a lot to do with both sides. Look, I agree. It's not an easy situation. But one thing we can never do, and I don't think that the BBC or Fox or CNN or any of these politically driven societal media forms, I don't think any of them are strong enough against this. If people can somehow even consider saying, well, you know, those people have been oppressed. So those people have been oppressed. So, and you did say, I'm not talking about you, Alistair, but get my point. The fact that this is not a bigger cry, that women have been raped and killed and burned alive, and there has been brutality. I think it's atrocious, and I think that anybody who can't say that, and some of these media, not you, you started with that, but I'm just fed up. I am fed the hell
I said
up.
that, and it's not being denied, by British broadcasters, not at all. No, that's all been reported, Ross.
Yeah.
But I think the other side is actually not actually so well reported, even here in my country, in terms of the ongoing problems in areas like, say, the West Bank. We know that there was a deal, I think a bad deal, the Oslo Accords, that you've got Zone A, Zone B, and Zone C, and so on. But in the military occupation, no permits whatsoever are issued, and this is about people building in their own villages.
Yeah.
And they're not allowed to do it, not allowed legally to do it.
Well, part
so
of
they
that
don't
is,
have that right.
Yeah, part of that. Did you say we don't have that right? I didn't hear you. What was that?
No, I'm saying that Palestinians in their own villages are not given the permit, the right to build a home in their own village.
Yeah, part of that, it has been traced even by the United Nations that more and more people show up and claim that their families have been there from time immemorial. And so they want to stake that claim. By the way, Joan Peters' book is excellent. She had a very liberal view, and she felt like the bad Israelis weren't treating, there was no fair treatment, and that's a very good book. I highly recommend it. I'm gonna make one more point, and then I'm gonna call Karen, Dave, if you don't mind, because she hadn't spoken yet. But one thing that is very important, justice must be sought. I agree. Justice must be sought. And one thing about the Israelis is there is a voice in those places where people can continue to approach the government and say, we want that permit. And you might say, and others have said, well, it's not fast enough and they're not granting those. But let me tell you about Area A, B, C. Do you know that if you're an Israeli and you go into Area A, you're taking your life in your own hands? If you're a Muslim, if you're an Arab and you go into an area that is B or C, C is ruled by Israel, you may know this. B is called the Baligan. It's all screwed up because it's trying to let both have some authority. And then A is dangerous. There are signs in red. There are people who have accidentally gone in those areas, and those people that live there, when they see an Israeli tag, they'll kill them. They'll try to kill them. They'll throw rocks at them. That doesn't happen as much. There are cases where extremist settlers, as you called it, act in injustice against Arabs. And you know what happens because of Israel's government? They're tried, they're jailed, and thank God they are.
That does not happen, Ross. That does not happen. According to the BBC this week, there was no attempt by Israeli soldiers standing by when a young guy, a young Palestinian, unarmed, was shot in the stomach.
Well,
Another one was killed.
That's horrible.
Yeah. And they're not being defended, and there's no justice. There's no justice.
Yeah. In cases like that, I'm not, you have to understand, I'm not saying that injustice is right if it's at the arms of a Jewish settler. I don't believe that. But I do think that there's a lot more to the story. I do think that the world primarily would probably lean more towards a very liberal, the Europeans and Americans. A lot of people do think that the Jews are the bad guys. They've oppressed these poor Arab people. It's not my view. It's certainly not my view. And,
I'm not saying that because
yeah.
we know that actually there are a lot of Jewish bodies trying to support the Palestinians, like B'Tselem, to call for human rights for these Palestinians. We know that 1,300 American Jewish academics wrote a letter recently saying that sadly, in their eyes, Israeli has become an apartheid state.
Oh, yeah.
And I saw on the West Bank how there's a dual system. You've got a different infrastructure where you link together the Israeli settlements with new roads, bridges, and all that are not open to the Palestinians. The Palestinians are denied often water supplies and power supplies. They are, I'm convinced, an oppressed community, and that's going to fester in terms of resentment, and it's not good for peace.
Yeah,
and that's my concern. It's not the way to peace.
I appreciate
that lack of justice is not the way to peace.
I appreciate your opinion, and it is the opinion of quite a few.
And,
so,
okay.
Thank you very much.
And the history, finally, last point is that sadly, if you go back to these books of the Bible you're quoting, unfortunately, Israel was founded on genocide. If you believe what's written in the Old Testament, it was founded on the slaughter of the Canaanites and the other peoples that were in the land.
So
to
you
clear
have
it
you
for
just Alistair. Let me just
Israel.
say you have totally gone in a different direction than I have, and I respectfully would say thank you for your comments. But I would also say that if your view is that your view is taking the side of these liberal theologians who signed a letter and those who don't believe the Bible, then we really don't have a way to connect. What I will say, though, and then I'm going to let Karen speak, is that I do believe in justice for all. And I believe that that is the goal, and that will be the result, that ultimately justice will be sent. And I think that Israel, the government of Israel, for the most part, represents that to everyone who lives within its boundaries. And when those cases are violated, then there is a system to confront that, and I think that that's the case. Karen, yes, ma'am.
Hey, so if you want to go back to the story of the concubine of Gibeah in Judges, how's that start? A group of men in Benjamin rape a woman to death.
Yeah.
Sound familiar? And so Israel unites, comes against them, and says, "Send the men out," but they don't. So everyone pays. They get burned alive, men, women, and children in their villages.
Yeah.
Until almost the entire tribe is wiped out. And is a similar situation. Send the men out. Well, they won't. And everybody pays the price, unfortunately.
Yeah, we can pretend that that there's one group that's oppressed and that they have just been trying to do the right thing. But anyone who really studies the history will see that this is not the case. If you go back to even before the great Aliyahs, and you look at Arab massacres in 1929, you look at those things. But see, a lot of people conveniently forget all that. I think that we have to study all of the history. That's just my view, though. Yes, David. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Karen.
Well, as far as permits for building, that is not isolated to Israel. In Maui, where my sister lives, you do not get a building permit unless you grease the palm.
Yeah.
I lived in a town, 5 generations on both sides of my family, in a town that I grew up in, and you could not build a house for 20 years because there was a building moratorium. The infrastructure couldn't support that many houses, and so nobody built nothing for 20 years. My hometown in Oregon.
Yeah, people don't talk about that, but it's ridiculous to use that in the sense that a lot of people will claim that, but like you said, Jews are complaining against their own government. One of the biggest complaints is that they can't build either. And part of the
Right.
reason they can't build is because the Europeans and the Americans have tried to hogtie them and say this is the way you have to do things. So, if you look at the modern, what is called the West Bank, how did that become the West Bank? What is the history of that? What do we know about the Palestinian Authority? Most people who are very pro-Palestinian and against these bad Israelis don't know anything about the Palestinians. They don't know anything about Mahmoud Abbas. They don't know anything about Hamas. They don't know anything about Hezbollah. They won't admit that the whole purpose of many of these Arab nations is to bring death and destruction to the Jewish people. They conveniently ignore all of these facts. Whenever we study history, some of it is uncomfortable. And there are things that make you go, man, I wish that wasn't part of this story, but it really is. Particularly when you look at what are some of these, for instance, Hamas. I think most people would say Hamas is bad, except the people that are marching in the streets and saying that the Jews had it coming to them for all this stuff that they did. But Hamas, their whole purpose is to kill Jews. I mean, that's one of the main things that they want is to kill the Jews. And let me ask you this. Do you think that the Arabs that live there now that are called the Palestinians now, do you think that they want just the little area of the West Bank and they want total autonomous control? Do you think they just want the Gaza? You know why they've said no to every peace deal that's been presented to them? They don't want to share it with the Jews. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. It's called Judenrein. If a Palestinian wants to come to an Israeli area, they can go to a Jewish area, but it's not the other way around. You can't go in an area A if you're an Israeli citizen. You're not allowed. You can't live there. Can any Jews live in Gaza? No, the ones that did live there were forced to leave. Dave Tyler.
Hey, thank you, Ross. I wanted to say, Alistair, I really appreciate the issues you brought up. And in following up with that, no one talks about broadly how are Palestinians treated in Jordan and in Lebanon. I'm not. You look it up. I'm not going to tell you.
Egypt. Yeah.
Yeah, they're treated the same way. I don't mean exact. The hatred isn't there, but they're not allowed to do anything. They're not allowed to become citizens. They're forced to stay in camps, and no one talks about this. It's an inconvenient truth that no one wants to bring up. And again, I do agree that in Israel it's so much more sensitive, but it's kind of one of these things that, in America, what we did, we put Japanese and Italians in concentration camps in World War II. Some of my family was put in an Italian concentration camp because they had left-leaning views, and so I'm just saying it's always everywhere. And my point at the end of the day is that there does have to be a meeting. And Ross and I know that we sat with Ofer, the guy who runs the crocodile farm in Erevot, and he's against the way the Israelis have treated the Palestinians from the beginning, and he was in special ops. So I think there's a multitude of views in Israel, which I appreciate, and I listen to them. Just like in America, you talk about politics in America today. I was born in the 50s. In the 70s, we never argued about politics. Is my friends and I didn't even know what they voted for. But I do think today it's become so explosive, and people aren't listening. So I wanted to say to Alistair, I was listening to you, and I heard a lot of what you're saying, and I appreciate you having a different opinion. And we all can learn from listening to the people that are against our point of view or the other point of view. And I'm kind of a very independent thinker, and I think a lot of people are independent thinkers. So I just wanted to say to him, I really appreciate differences in point of view, and like I say, it's a lot of it depends on what you've been sold. Our kids today have been sold one side of the story,
That's right.
and that's a problem because they've been sold one side of this. I had a young girl on my back deck. Her boyfriend is a musician, and we're doing it, and we have a studio here, and we're doing music. She said to me, there are more than one sex. And I said, well, not biologically, maybe mentally. No, biologically. I said, well, where'd you get that from? Because you use science to bash religion all the time. Now you're forgetting science to meet your social agenda. And I was very calm, and I kept talking to her. And it's the bashing that they've taken since kindergarten. What do you feel like today? And one of my friends lives in South Carolina. His granddaughter got a tablet for school. And when the tablet turns on, it says, how gay do you feel today? He, of course, him and his wife didn't like that. Neither did the kid's parents. But my point isn't about this issue. My point is, if we're just sold one side all the time, it taints our point of view. So we do have to look at all the different sides and pro or con to your position and help you make your position. And I'm going to say I support.
Let me jump
Yeah.
in. So
Yeah.
thanks for
That's
that. Thanks for you coming on and saying that, because let me say, not too long ago, within the last few years, I was exposed to the idea that Israel was an apartheid state. And some of you who follow my religious teachings know that once I decide to investigate something, I'm in. So, for instance, I was brought up, this will make a point in a minute, and Keller, I see your hand, so give me 1 minute. I believe that the King James Bible was the holy, inspired, inerrant Word of God, and I was a fundamental Bible-thumping Christian, and you couldn't convince me otherwise. And if you tried, you were bad, I'm good, you're wrong, I'm right. That was my view. So over time, though, I began to investigate. I began to study the languages behind the Bible. I began to look at critical academic views of the Bible. I began to question things that I'd been taught from childhood. And I did the same and continue to do the same with the geopolitical views of the land of Israel. When I was exposed to the idea that Israel was an apartheid state, my question to myself was, hey, what if Israel, the government of Israel, really is as bad as the liberal governments of the world claim and the haters of the Jewish state claim? What if they're telling the truth? What if Israel has oppressed this people and not allowed them any opportunities to succeed? And what if I, because I'm a white American Bible-thumping person, what if I am perpetuating the bad against these people who have been part of this country from time immemorial? That was my question. What if the Palestinians are the natives of the land? And I began to think about that. And when I began to think about that, I really started studying. So I've read books on all the different views, and I didn't show all my math today. I began with the biblical view. But I can tell you right now that I don't accept personally, and I encourage everyone to study these really fully out. But one of the books that I really almost always encourage people, if you want to discuss it, if you really want to discuss it, because I'm not going to do a tit for tat, because I can tell when someone comes out with a view that Israel is totally, apartheid in that sense. And what I tell them is, I can tell they haven't read Joan Peters, which takes you to all of the official documents. And it really is good. Now, it's hard to find now. I have a couple of copies of it. But the exact title is From Time Immemorial, the Origins of the Arab-Jewish Conflict over Palestine. Now, here's what she did. she went to Israel to begin to write about the atrocities committed by the Jewish state. And she uncovered some things that that challenged that view. And let me tell you where it starts. It starts with understanding the refugee problem. Why are the Palestinian refugees, why is there a special class in the United Nations documentation for refugees that are Palestinian? Why is it different there than it is for all other refugees in all the known world? And why do we never hear about the hundreds of thousands of refugees, Jews, who were kicked out with no time to bring their luggage, no time to pack? They were forced out of the lands that they had lived in and their families had lived in for generations. All the Arab nations kicked the Jews out right after the founding of the Jewish state. Now, where are they supposed to go? Now, what we also don't hear about is how the Arab leaders, the day after the UN partition vote, the day after, when all the Arab nations attacked Israel to destroy it, when that, right before that happened, they asked all of the Arabs, the Palestinians, leave now. We'll wipe these bad Jews out, and then you can come back in and take over. And then, you know, a lot of people don't know the details of that either. I would encourage everyone, it is a complex situation, and it's difficult. For those of us who seek to understand from a biblical perspective, my goal this morning was to lay out a biblical perspective of God's promise to Israel. Now, all of these other lands around this one spot, according to the Bible. Now, if somebody says, well, I don't believe the Bible, well, you're in a different world than I am. You know, but if you believe the Bible, or if you at least give it a little bit of credence, I would suggest that people consider, what about all these other people groups? Where do they live? So anyway, I know I rambled a little bit, but there's more to the story, and I want to approach things from every angle. I want to at least consider, I want to think that I am being balanced in my view. I haven't always been, and we all have certain biases that we have to try to work through. But anyway, yes, Kalair, if you still have the energy to speak after listening to all that.
I do. Good afternoon.
Hey, how are you?
Okay. I just want to say I like the title of your class today, which was who does Israel belong to? Because the truth is, who does the world belong to? That is God.
Yeah.
There is only one being that knows the total history. That is God.
Yeah.
And I think that I think that the layers of hatred for the Jewish people is never far from the surface.
Yeah.
It never is, and it never has been. And I think that if someone doesn't want to look at the reason why, that's an issue. For so many to have believed immediately that they bombed that hospital,
Yeah.
was so, I mean, literally what they can say is, do you know how hated we have been the whole time?
Mm-hmm.
It has never been very far from the surface. For them to have done that, and it doesn't matter if they did or not, people are like, yeah, they did it.
Yeah.
The hatred has never been far from the surface, and that is a problem. That's all.
That is an excellent point. It's condemn first and look for the truth later.
Yes.
Israel is called an apartheid state. That and you talk to people in South Africa. I watched a group of South Africans singing Hatikva, because these people are very biblically oriented, and they know apartheid doesn't allow Arabs to be in the highest offices of a land. You know, I mean, that's not the definition of apartheid. Yes, Karen.
I listened to an interview with a Jordanian. He was a former Muslim converted to Christianity, named, I think, Walid Shabat.
Yeah.
Or something like that. And he said that the Jordanian government, the Hashmonean government, the royal family, they keep Palestinians in a permanent refugee status, whether they were born there or not, because they get paid. They get a certain amount of money per head per refugee from whatever organization does that. And so it's there and a financial incentive, whether the person's been there for 2 or 3 generations. They will not give them citizenship. They keep them in a permanent refugee status.
Yeah. And your point, this is what most people don't really know. Think about this. Why are other Arab nations not allowing, why did they never allow any of the flow back from these Palestinians, right? Why was that never allowed? Why is it not allowed now? Why is it that in Jordan right now, in Amman, in the streets of Amman, aside from their anti-Israel marches, they're petitioning their government to open up and let some of these Palestinians come into Jordan? And you know why won't they let them? The whole goal is to eradicate the presence of the Jews in the Holy Land. From day one, this has been the mission, and the propaganda machine is really well machined. That propaganda machine that promotes a negative view of the Jewish state and a positive view of everybody but the Jews is very well financed, and it is very good. But you can find books, we can still read. As long as we can read, we can find the truth, and the truth is there. Yes, Karen, did you have something else? I kind of jumped in there. You good? Yeah. But Walid I've also read some of his stuff. Very good. He's honest. He puts it out there. Joshua Chisholm, yes, sir.
Good afternoon. I certainly appreciated the study this morning, and I've also appreciated the differing perspectives. And I want to thank Dave and Dr. Tabor especially. Everything that they said this morning is near and dear to my heart. I've thought for years, why in the world are all of the Arab nations around Israel not allowing the Palestinian people and the inhabitants of Gaza to come take refuge? Why are they still fighting? There seems to be a dramatic difference in moral values, but I've searched a lot of corners of the internet. Most of you know that my job is in information technology, and I see some things that I really wish I could unsee over the last 20 years. But the general consensus is that the Arabs around these lands, they do not consider the people inhabiting the West Bank or the people inhabiting Gaza to be Arabs. They say this with passion and vigor. They don't share blood with these people. And apparently, it's not important to them that they share a faith. They don't care that they're Islamic. They simply don't want them in their lands. And we saw this last week with Egypt. They built barriers preventing the people in Gaza to get out of this violence. So I think it's evil. I've always had a problem with it, and I think I'm starting to learn over the last few weeks what the Arab perspective is. But it's from a humanist perspective, they don't really care about human rights of these people. And I don't understand why. The Jordanian population is there. They have huge numbers of what they consider Palestinians living in Jordan. Why doesn't Jordan step in to help these people? Anyway, I wrote some thoughts down, and I wanted to intercede for Mr. Moody's perspective just for a moment, because I think what he said is fair. I certainly have issues with the BBC and a lot of other media, but I'm familiar with so many media sources. I know that the mainstream often conceals the truth for political purposes. And there's a lot of fact and news out there that has to be carefully sifted through. So, I mean, I don't want to dump on the BBC, but let's consider for a moment that there is bad behavior on both sides in the West Bank. But by the numbers, the Jews are not committing violence in the same way that the people inhabiting the West Bank are. The inhabitants of the West Bank are simply not cooperating with the Israeli government when it comes to executing local law enforcement. They don't treat local laws the same way. Doesn't matter if you're talking about real estate laws or criminal laws. They don't want to share governance. And that's created a disparity of justice on both sides. So how are we to decide, what's just in this instance? I mean, and who gets to decide that? My opinion is that if the people living there truly wanted peace, that they would share this government and they would uphold justice on both sides. That's not happening. So if the Israelis are committing an unjust violence in a more disproportionate manner, then we can have a conversation about that. But I would argue that there is a preponderance of evidence that's not happening. If the people in the West Bank have been given the opportunity to have peace by upholding the laws in the land, then who has the right to decide how to execute justice in the West Bank? And what we've talked about this morning is a biblical perspective. God promised the land to Israel. The Bible also indicates that the people who inhabit the land, if they're not Israel, or if they're not genetic Israel, they have to abide by the laws of the land. And from a biblical perspective, this is God's law we're talking about. So I would just, just the idea that if we want to esteem man-made laws about human rights and the Geneva Convention, to be more important than biblical history, that's a completely different conversation.
Right.
We're talking about a difference between modern man-made laws and what we see in the Bible. And that's what we talk about in this group.
Thanks for those comments, Joshua. One thing about it, and by the way, I see Sue's hand as well, but I was going to say, since I started going to Jordan, Jordan is one of my favorite places, and I know Sue lived there, but I'm telling you, I love Jordan, and I love the people, I love the culture. I've never encountered any anti-Jewish sentiment. In fact, at least with our tour guide and the people that I've met over there, it's been very friendly. They know that, we're studying the Bible and they're familiar with the stories. And so Jordan is typically not a big problem, and neither is Egypt. In fact, from the beginning of this thing, October the 7th, one of my thoughts was, okay, Egypt's going to step in and broker peace. We'll see it quickly. We didn't see it as quickly as I thought, but we're seeing it. And now we're seeing Egypt and Jordan, and everybody is going to the table. I'm a little concerned over how this is going to shake out. Clearly, Israel, the world's view of Israel, as Keller said, is the hatred is not far from the surface. And it took some people, even in our government, have yet to condemn Hamas's actions. People justify these horrible actions. So, I tell you, but I do love, it's not like I'm anti any of these Arabs, but when it comes to Israel, there is these people, the surrounding nations, do not want Israel. They don't want a Jewish state. You can't argue me down on that. I can't believe that I would ever accept the view that they are happy that, yay, we have Jews in the neighborhood. You talk about the racist views. I mean, like I said, there are places that are Judenrein. You can't go if you're Jewish. Yes, Sue. Can you? I don't hear you yet. How about I come back to you? Joshua, did you still have something? Did I cut you off too soon? I'm sorry, I may have.
No, I'm sorry. We just had a new update on Zoom, and they changed the buttons on the hand raise.
Ah, okay. Yeah, I think Seth is tweaking things. By the way, take a deep breath, everyone. Whether you agree with my view or not, I do appreciate everybody coming today. One thing that I wanted to say is that Seth is working on some things to make these transitions more easy. So, for instance, I don't even know what all he did. He worked last night while I was dreaming, hopefully pleasant dreams. But he made some things where at the close of the class, if you didn't find the link, you would be transitioned to the Zoom call automatically. The Zoom call now is streamed to the United Israel YouTube channel, and there are all sorts of things that we're working on. So,
I
Sue,
love that. That's
yeah,
going to reach a wider audience and let people see what we talk about whenever we get on Zoom. And I think that's important.
yeah, I do too. I do too. Sue, are you ready to chat yet? Did you get your mic working? I see you're unmuted. I just don't hear you yet. Okay. Betty, yes.
Oh, I was just checking out the new thing that Seth did, practicing
Okay.
under the more button. It's the three dots at the end. That's where the hand raise is. So I was just checking it out, and then I lowered my hand.
Okay.
So,
all right.
thanks.
Well, very good. Well, I tell you, it has been, let's see, it is 1:20, and so we've been going for quite a while. Look, this is a very passionate subject. I realize that. And I realize that not everyone is going to agree with me. And I have come to the place in my life that I'm okay with that. I don't have to dislike someone because they don't agree with me. And Alistair, you are considered a friend of mine. We may not agree. You may think I'm absolutely bonkers and I still care for you. I care for people. I don't have to disagree. I don't have to like someone or agree with them and put all that in one package. Let me put it this way. I have to make a stand on my convictions, just like everyone else does. And I believe that Israel, as a secular government, has its problems, but I also believe that they have fought a long battle against haters. They continue to fight that battle, and I want to think that everything that I'm reading now and that I have read says that their goal is right. Their goal is right. They still have rough edges, perhaps. But I don't think that the remedy to that is to fight against them. So, is it because of my upbringing? Am I biased because of that? People could argue that. But I tell you, right now, I'm praying for the state of Israel. When I pray for the state of Israel, I mean all of its inhabitants. All of its inhabitants. I'm praying for the IDF. And I'm praying that the IDF eliminates the hostile, that that's done with minimal casualty to innocents. And I pray to God that these people that have been taken captive are brought back and restored. We can't go back and change those that were burnt to death and whole villages that were totally annihilated. Can't fix that. Except that we can work until those people who are advocating. Remember, this group Hamas was elected. This group Hamas has been elected, and I pray that the people, the good people of Gaza, and I believe there are good people of Gaza, I hope that they overthrow these wicked ones whose only desire is to murder and kill. Joshua, you going to take us out?
Yes, this is less to do with one side against another and more about good against evil. I think it is a just fight to fight against evil in whatever form it comes in. And I'm not a believer in ends justifying the means.
Yeah.
But I do believe that it's our responsibility as believers, whatever form that takes, that we have to take a stand against evil And if we have to sacrifice ourselves, or if we even have to commit murder, evil has to be put a stop to, or they're going to put a stop to us.
How about this? I think we can all pray that God, in His righteousness, because remember, I started the class with the land belongs to God. I mean, that's a biblical quote. We can call it whatever, but the land belongs to God, and those who live there are sojourning, is the way that he puts it in Leviticus chapter 25. I do want to remind people that Wednesday, we've changed one thing, and you need to know about this. Some of you may want to know about this. If you want to be part of Wednesday, Jonah and I are doing our show. We were doing it live on Thursday, but we've decided to move that to Wednesday. We still do it live, but we do it live in Discord with a group who support what we're doing here, the Yakad. Whether a person is a member of our YouTube channel or a person who is part of the Patreon, but that group gets a backstage pass, if you will. And we go in a live studio audience. Seth has corrected me. He said, don't call it a live studio audience. What Wednesday is now, so let me go ahead and fix this before Seth has to turn his mic on and straighten me out. This is a group of, he may still have to do it. I forgot how he put it. It's a group of friends who, even though Jonah and I will be talking, we'll lay out a course, but we want our audience to begin to know who is Joshua, who is Karen, who is JJ, you know, and they start to know, oh, that's Clody. Let's see where you're like friends on a panel. So when the thing comes out Thursday, people are listening and they get to know some of you. And so it's sort of like a radio show with all kind of guests. We have guest interviews kind of going on with this live show. Anyway, I may have butchered that. Guest stars. There you go. I see Seth's note now. Guest stars. That's what he called it. And that's what it is. So it's fun. I thought, even though this last Wednesday, we really didn't intend to even record anything. We were just doing a training session. It turned out fantastic. I mean, the audio worked well. The video was perfect. And Seth's goal is that he doesn't have to do any editing, that we just, unless somebody comes on and, you know, screams, you know, something profane or whatever. But other than that, we shouldn't have to edit. So, all right. Okay. Hey, thanks for being patient with me. Thanks for joining me. And let's all hope and pray that God brings righteousness to this troubled planet. We've got a lot of problems in the world, and so I hope and pray that all of you can join me Wednesday night. If you can't join me Wednesday night, I'll hope to see you next Saturday. Shabbat Shalom in our troubled world. Shavua Tov. Have a beautiful week.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, y'all.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. You heard you?
Shabbat Shalom.
You didn't hear me.
Shabbat Shalom. I love this Shabbat Shalom.
You didn't hear me on that.
All right. See you later. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Lehitrot.
Lehitrot.
That means see you later.
That's right. I like it.